So, has raiding in World of Warcraft got easier?
What do you mean, like over time sort of thing?
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people say that it has. Like in our videos, on forum posts, you see it on Reddit every now and
It's
then.
very typical of players that no longer play.
Yeah, exactly. They're just like, oh god, raiding's so easy. Especially when you're talking about lower difficulties. They're like, oh, any old scrub can go in LFR and kill all the bosses, which is true. That part of raiding has become easier, but I would say hard modes of raiding, definitely not. I'd say it's got more difficult over time.
But kills are so quick now.
That is another point, actually.
Why is that?
Why are kills a lot quicker? That's an interesting thing. There's a lot of different angles on that.
Okay, so I'm going to bring out some statistics. I've done some research, and we're going to basically compare the world first kills over the past 11 years or so,
Right.
and compare them to the more recent dates.
A couple of rough numbers, eh?
A couple of rough numbers, yeah. So I've done a bit of research. Molten Core, 154 days it took.
Well, a lot of people, I can already think of so many reasons why this took so long to kill. Not only was it the first raid, bless it, but probably most people were still leveling when it was available. Yep. At least I know, I didn't get like a bloody level 60 until like Zul'Gurub or something came out. And so that doesn't surprise me it took so long.
Onyxia, 69 days. Blackwing Lair, 77 days.
Jesus.
AQ40, 113 days. Nax 40, 90 days.
Wow.
So already, on an average, over the course of vanilla, it took 100 days to clear the instance.
For every instance, it was roughly 100 days.
For the world first kill, that is.
Yeah, of course. That's a long old time.
Yep.
I already know that some of the more recent kills have been a lot quicker than that.
Okay, we're now going to jump straight into Burning Crusade.
Right.
The
Where people are a
average-
little bit more clever.
The average was 53 days. So this is across Gruul, Magferodons, SSC, Tempest Keep, Hyjal, Black Temple, and Sunwell.
It took 53 days.
On average.
Wow.
53 days.
So it's already half.
It's already half.
Nearly.
So it's already half as easy.
Half as easy going into Burning Crusade.
Yeah,
It's
I
half
don't know if
as
that's the
quick.
right terminology. Probably not. Right, moving over to Wrath of Lich King. 35 days.
What, for the whole place?
Wrath of Lich King, 35 days on average.
I think one data point might be skewing this, and that
Yeah,
might
there
be
is.
Nax 25. I know for a fact, after 3 days the expansion came out, Insidia went in there and killed the whole place in 1 day.
Yeah.
So
that's a bit of
it
a
took
rogue
them-
data
It
there.
took 3 days to clear Nax 25. Which,
You say, I mean, Old Duel took 85, Trial of the Grand Crusader took 7, ICC took 46.
ICC was a bit weird as well because they kind of released it over a long period of time and there was limited attempts as well, which kind of slowed down progress quite a lot. But I agree. Once again, 35 days for the entire expansion.
It's still that is the exact amount. 35
it's
days.
very, very short.
Cataclysm, 27 days.
For the entire thing, each one on average.
On average, again, 27 days to complete it. Mr. Pandaria, 12 days.
Okay.
Mogashan Vaults.
That's a big leap already.
Yeah, Mogashan Vaults, 4 days. Heart of Fist, 6 days. Terrace of the Endless Springs, 6 days. Throne of Thunder, 15 days for Lai Shen. And 31 days for Raden.
Raden, once again, limited attempts, and
Yeah.
he was fucking rock hard. It was broken. It was a broken fight.
And then Siege of Orgrimmar was 15 days. So, yeah, that brings the average
these
down
days
to 12.
as well, just to let people know, they're from the day that Heroic was released. They're the hardest difficulty was released, at least with this new stuff. Of course, Ragnaros didn't have loads of different difficulties back in the day, but these are the Heroic modes. So once Mogashan Vaults came out on Heroic, it took people 4 days to clear the place.
And then you've got Warlords of Draenor, which is an average of 10 days. So if you look at the graph,
God.
which we probably don't have it.
Well, I can't do a graph.
Yeah.
I edit these and I'm not clever enough to do a graph. So pretend there's a graph and it's slowly going down.
But the correlation is that, yes, raiding is getting easier in terms of time. But does that actually make it easier?
So yeah, if you're looking at if you just look flat out at the numbers, then yes, bosses are definitely getting killed quicker and quicker. Even if these numbers are a tiny bit off, because of course, like especially some of the older sources, it's hard to get exact dates on and everything. But bosses are 100% getting killed quicker and quicker. But there's so many different things that aren't taken into account in these numbers. Like for one, let's just start. I've got like a ton of reasons why these numbers don't really make much sense in terms of if they're difficult or not. Number one, players are just fucking better.
Yeah, 100% true.
If you look at the very beginning of the game, everyone was shit. That's expected. You're going into a new game. Everyone's going into a new game, and you're all trying to do a very large group activity together.
Yeah, and the raid sizes were much larger as well.
Yeah, so you got people keyboard turning, you got people clicking on their action bars, which of course are two like very bad things to do because you can't like limit your movement and everything.
Can't multitask, basically.
It's very difficult. The UIs were a mess. Boss mods weren't as common. Generally, UIs like and add-ons, they weren't as popular.
Yeah.
Like not as many people did it. People would just play with the base thing. That means that you didn't have DBM telling you when the boss was going to do their thing. There wasn't really that many guides out. You might have written ones, but you know there wasn't a shit ton of like
Resources
accessible
available,
resources as well. So yeah, and the thing is, because classes were a bit of a mess back then as well, nobody knew what they were doing with their class.
Yeah, a lot of it didn't make sense.
Yeah, either it didn't make sense or people just didn't know how to play properly back then. And that's fine. Like their classes were confusing and nobody knew how to play them. So that's one thing. It would take like worse, inconsistent players a far longer time to kill a boss than it would nowadays a set of good players. You know?
Exactly. Well, that kind of transitions into this point, is that these days standards of rating are quite high. It's established. Everyone understands exactly what's expected of them, when back then it wasn't as religious. So, for example, for a lot of players back then, they probably didn't understand what it's like to be part of a raiding guild, especially if WoW was your first MMO.
Yeah.
Like it was for me. I didn't understand basic things like you're expected to turn up on time. If you don't turn up on time, then you're not part of the guild, you're not part of the raid. That sort of shit happened all the time. Having your character prepared with the right consumables, everything like that was obviously like a really big deal, especially later on in vanilla, where you had to go farm all the individual mats, like going in Felorus and all that shit. Oh my god, that was horrible. Doing all that sort of shit was just terrible. And then there was always constant AFKs because you've got a group of 40 people. You obviously need to be able to play your character well within the raids, and typically that wasn't always the case. And also voice communication. Back then, going on TeamSpeak and everything like that wasn't always necessarily possible or even viable.
Yeah.
A lot of guilds actually raided in vanilla with absolutely no voice communication whatsoever.
Like thinking of doing
They would
that
literally
today.
type in chat.
Yeah, like normal mode raids and stuff like that can get off with anything like that. But imagine doing any mythic boss, like even the easy ones, without voice comm when in progress. That would be dreadful. That would be so bad. See, I didn't even think of that. No one was talking to one another. No wonder it took them so fucking long.
I mean, and all those things I just said, like, back then it just wasn't commonplace, and whereas now it's like a standard.
Yeah.
It's not like you're not an exceptional player because you follow those guidelines or those rules. It's just a standard.
Yeah, that's what's expected of you when you go into like probably a normal mode or higher guild sort of thing. You're expected to pop on TeamSpeak. You should at least have your character with some pots and flasks, maybe a couple of enchants, at least that kind of shit.
A couple of inches.
Only a couple. It's fucking expensive. But yeah, like you're expected to have that kind of stuff.
And also the bosses, of course, back then were designed differently. I mean, if
Yeah.
you compare them to how they are today, you can say that the bosses are designed poorly. In just a comparison, obviously the bosses have got much, much better, more complex, arguably less RNG based, and also just better designed for players. They're more user friendly, not easier, but user friendly. For example, if you let's take something from vanilla, say 4 horsemen and axe.
Oh right, that's like notorious for being.
That is just
cruel.
like the most cruel fight because you need 8 tanks for it. Where every other fight, you needed 2, 3, maybe 4 at max.
Yeah.
And now you suddenly need 8. And getting gear back then was fucking hard.
Especially for Nax.
Especially for that. So where the fuck are you going to get 8 tanks from?
Exactly.
So-
You don't. That's a very good point. You don't have any way. Like that was going to hinder so much progress just trying to get people on the right roles. Like especially more recently, class stacking and like especially role stacking and stuff like that seems to be less and less commonplace. Yes, there's always like flavor of the month. So say that like right now mages are like exceptionally good at doing damage. Yeah, it might be really good if you have 5 mages, but you don't need 5 mages to get a kill. Like I think the last thing I remember really class stacky was maybe Black Hand with like there was classes that were like exceptional at jobs.
Yeah.
Such as having 3 rogues,
Boomkins.
having 3 hunters, having at least 2 boomkins.
Yeah.
So like that kind of stuff is quite class stacky, but I think nowadays, especially with things like split raids, which I'm sure we'll come to in a minute, more and more people are more and more competent at playing lots of different classes because you're expected
and also,
to do so.
very, very importantly, the gear is readily available to do it.
Yes.
Whereas, previously gearing up was a pain in the ass. You had to gear up progressively. It was very hard to be boosted for gear.
Yeah.
And obviously bosses back then dropped far less gear, whereas today they drop far more gear. And there's loads of different versions which allow you to access even more, an even larger pool of gear.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, raiding does become easier because you have way more gear, but that just allows you, it doesn't necessarily make it easier, it just allows you to progress faster because you get more gear flooded towards you.
Yeah.
So getting your characters and your entire raid group into a position where they actually meet the damage and healing requirements or even the tanking requirements for a boss, it's just far easier these days than it was previously.
Well, and gear now makes sense. If we're talking about vanilla, like you get
the itemization on the gear actually is, you can see that there's some thought behind it. Whereas in vanilla it was like, what random stat can we put on this? Let's put some spirit on.
They
some
literally
fucking
rolled a
warrior
couple
gear.
D20s and just to see what the hell they're gonna put on the gear. So yeah, there's a lot of like just things to do with the game itself that is generally, it's just evolved over time. Like comparing raiding now to raiding back in the day, it's just so different. It's like a completely different game. Not only people, because raiding back then, like having 40 people all trying to do their own thing and actually trying to play together in a brand new game with like no particular set standards or anything, that is so impossible. And now 11 years later, everyone knows pretty much, like when you're going into raiding, you've done it for a little while, you know the rules, you know how bosses roughly work, you know that the tanks tank, you know you should probably get around 2 of them, you'll probably have 1 healer per 5 people, you know, that kind of stuff stays roughly the same for all things like that. But one thing that we very briefly touched on, players just play a ton more than they used
that's true.
to.
I mean, if you compare,
Because we're talking about world first here, we're not talking about average guilds. I'd say probably average guild like kill times have probably been roughly the same over the last couple expansions. Not vanilla and not Burning Crusade, but maybe from like Wrath of the Lich King onwards. It might have gone steadily down.
It's pretty much since the birth of split raids.
Yeah, since the birth of split raids.
Since the birth of split raids, I'd say that the average is, I mean, we don't have any data on this, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's very similar since pretty much ICC. I think that was maybe the birth of split raids.
So for split raids, for people who are completely oblivious, what split raids are is that you would split your guild into like 2 different groups, and each group would have half mains and half ults. And then what you do, you run the instance twice on a lower difficulty and just funnel all the gear into the main characters. Then when the heroic or the hard mode comes out the next week, you put all of the main characters back in the same group together and you just bum rush the place because you've got like the best possible start you can from the lower difficulty before the higher one started.
Yeah.
And that has gone nuts more recently.
Yeah,
it was very light back in ICC and stuff
when
like
it
that.
initially came out, it was more used for the limited attempts
Yeah.
and maybe like the first heroic week or whatever it was back then, normal week.
Yeah.
But it wasn't popular at all.
No, it was
very
like
few guilds did it.
top end.
Only the best guilds are doing it. Whereas you compare it to like nowadays, pretty much every single top 100 guild does it. And
Probably
they do
top 500 would do maybe a half and half raid for maybe half the instance.
Yeah, it really wouldn't surprise me because it's that easy to do, especially in normal mode. I mean, normal mode you can do in virtually any gear whatsoever as long as you've got communication.
Yeah.
Because the mechanics don't do enough damage to punish you.
Yeah.
And if you can get free gear, then why the fuck not? If you can just funnel gear to mains, it just makes the Mythic Week even more successful and even more worth your time. But as an example of talking about heroic split raids, for Hellfire Citadel, Method did 6 heroic clears and 4 normal clears in the first week. That's killing over 100 bosses in under 7 days.
They killed a lot. And the thing is, if in the top, like, maybe 100 guilds, they didn't maybe do as much as that, which is literally raiding all the fucking time. But they probably didn't do as much as that. But I know, at least in our guild, I think we did 4?
We did 4 heroics and 4 normals.
We did 4 normals.
Or was it 3 normals? Might have been 3 normals.
I don't know how I survived that week. Oh, they're so dull, those runs. It's kind of really nice because you get to play loads of different characters during the split runs, and it's kind of cool, like especially when you're on your main, and then
And you just
shit
get loads
drops,
of gear thrown
and it's
at you.
just like that's mine. You're just kind of gathering all this gear up.
Well,
and
the
it's
thing
awesome.
is, from the split raids as well, not only are you getting the benefit of fueling mains with even more gear than what they get if they were all in one group, but also everyone else is getting the experience playing other classes that are potentially very useful when it comes down to doing mythic progression. Because I know, like for example, when we're doing the split raids, we try and split everyone up into their own tier sets as much as we possibly can.
Yeah.
So we get a Vank group, a Conk group, a Proc group, etc. But there's always like 1 or 2 extra people
Yeah.
that we try and funnel some gear into, and they're usually ults. So we think, okay, in the future we're going to use those ults on this fight, and that's what we did on an example for Zul'Harak.
Yeah, we needed Death Knights.
We needed Death Knights and we needed Rogues, so we made sure we had some extra gear available to them.
Yeah.
And the same for Manaroth. I think we used an extra Death Knight. I can't remember. We did that. Either way, we had ults available and we made sure we had gear on them so they could come in and do their job at a later date. And I'm sure guilds like Method did the exact same thing,
100%.
probably even on a higher scale. So
that's exactly it, because especially with the prevalence of PTR testing and beta testing and bosses,
which is another point,
Yeah.
because previously that wasn't done.
yeah, you kind of know roughly how the boss is going to work.
Dungeon
and
Journal?
Yeah, and the Dungeon Journal, you can make decisions before going in. So if you go ahead, like we've been testing loads of bosses, there's been loads of videos up on our channel about loads of different of the beta bosses and the alpha bosses, and we can see going into that, we might come to a fight and we're just like, oh, these ads are like a massive pain in the ass. They really need to be controlled. Do you know what? Death Knights would be amazing here, or maybe Druids would be really good for their Vortex. When we gear up for this instance, make sure we have a couple of those left over.
Yeah.
We get to make decisions in advance, and of course, heroics get absolutely annihilated in the first week. Not only because it's kind of made for I'd say the average raider, and of course you've got all these hard mode, like hardcore players that play like all fucking day. You got those going into it, but we've seen it all before, and a lot of them have died already before they've really reached live servers.
Yeah. When you've already tested the majority of the abilities, and very rarely do they change before they hit live servers.
They might have a small like
there
bug
might be a
fix
a small tweak, but comparatively, I mean, let's look at Legion testing so far.
yeah.
Only 1 boss has been retested.
Yeah, and that was Chronomatic Anomaly. He's changed a lot.
He
as
did
well.
change quite
We're
a
going to be
lot.
making a new
But
video.
it wouldn't
on that.
surprise me by the time these all hit live, they'll be exactly the same.
Yeah, I don't think Chronomatic Anomaly
Just
is
like
gonna
they were in
change
as an
much.
example with Siege. Siege barely changed.
Mm-hmm.
The same with Highmore and
Blackrock Foundry.
Bachelor Foundry. They barely changed
Yeah,
as well.
so you get all of this pre-information, which is helpful. But yeah, with players playing a lot more, it's not only that they're doing more raids, it's because they're raiding longer. I think I'm safe in saying that back in like Molten Core or back in Vanilla or even Burning Crusade, day raiding wasn't really a thing.
It was, but not on the scale that maybe it is today. I wouldn't say it's as militant as it is today.
Yeah, I'd agree with
In the
you.
sense that it's way more organized now. And what you got to remember as well is that another factor this probably maybe applies to only vanilla, but like things like corpse runs, rebuffing, all that sort of shit, just general raid turnaround took way longer back then than it does today.
That's actually very true.
And even just small little time saves between the boss makes a big deal, especially when you're aiming for a world first.
And if you've got 40 people all having to sort their shit.
And the thing is, I'd say that raiding has probably been more competitive over the past sort of 2-3 expansions. Pretty much since ICC, let's put it that way. It's been more competitive then than it has been ever.
Yeah.
I mean, there were mini races going on during TBC, but vanilla, there was barely any race whatsoever. People were just picking up the game and learning how to play it. There wasn't really a race culture then.
Yeah, there wasn't
Whereas-
a drive to
Yeah.
go. Like WoW Progress wasn't there, and everyone's like checking out. And it isn't like MMO Champion probably wasn't as popular, so there wasn't like a really easy source just to say, look, this boss has
Yeah.
been killed. Here's a boss kill video, and everyone's like it's all hype. There's loads of chat about people killing all these bosses world first. It's a big culture around it now.
Yeah.
At least in like higher end guilds, there's nothing but talk about how the other guilds are doing, because everyone wants to do the best that they can.
And the thing is, they almost become fans. You choose a guild at the start of a tier.
Oh yeah, and it's like I want
And it's
X
like, I
to
want
win.
them to win.
Yeah.
And there's not really much reasoning behind it, apart from maybe you know a couple of people there or something like that.
Or
But-
you just
or you
randomly
want
pick.
them. You just pick. I want them to win.
Yeah, and it does become a little bit of a weird spectator sport that you just
Yeah.
kind of hear about rather than watch live. But yeah, the main thing I wanted to say is that because players are just flat out raiding more, it's not unusual for some guilds to raid like 12 hours a day. Like
Oh yeah,
in
no,
the
that's
first couple of
pretty
weeks.
standard.
Yeah, so the term day raiding literally means you wake up, get a bit of breakfast,
It's work.
play video
It's
games.
a job.
Yeah, and you do that for a couple weeks or however long the guild has decided to do. So however long everyone can take time off work, people book time off work to do raiding,
Yeah.
and then they'll just do as much as they possibly can. And that, I'm pretty sure, wasn't much of a thing. I don't think it would have been possible in vanilla, getting 40 people to take time off work to do something. Probably wouldn't even be possible. It would be, like, stupid. So it has changed a lot because of that. But yeah, people just raid a shit ton more. And
it's just way more efficient, and the game allows them to be more efficient.
Exactly. So even though the Archimon was killed in 16 days, the amount of pulls that Method and Paragon managed to get on it is ridiculous.
It's like near 500 or something, right?
So Method got 472, apparently, and Paragon's had 675 pulls on Archimon.
That's just crazy, isn't it?
The thing is, we had a similar amount of pulls to Method. I think we
had 300 and something.
Yeah, around 300 and something, and we got 29 or 28 or something. It's just, I'm pretty sure, but as you said quite rightly, the turnaround on raids is so much quicker. When you die, you get back in the thing, you know exactly what you need to do, flask up, quickly mount up and repair. It's just a lot more smoother, and you know what you're doing going forward.
And these guys are fucking professionals.
To an extent, yeah. Yeah, some of them...
There's a standard that they've set,
yeah,
and that standard gets higher and higher each tier.
As the other guys get higher as well.
Yeah, because as you get better, you want to keep raising the bar. You want to raise the bar until you can no longer raise it.
Well, it's got to the point now, and it's been like this for quite a while, that like top-end guilds have people just writing add-ons for them as well. Like, that isn't unusual. You'd get people who know how to code Lua, and they might not even be part of the raid team.
Well, we had it for us. We had a guy write the
add-on for us over the weekend.
The Mark of the Legion helper. We spoke to him. We used to raid with him in Siege of Orgrimmar.
Yeah.
And he was a coder for some company. And we said, do you know Lua? And he was like, kinda.
He was like, can you make us this, please?
He was like, yeah, sure, give me a weekend.
And that's kind of half to do with bosses. Like, timers sometimes just aren't enough.
Yeah.
Like, we talked about this last week with Archimon. The reason he wasn't on the top 5 list is because how add-on dependent he was. But there's so many other bosses where all these little add-ons really, really help out. Like, I'm sure a lot of people have used Iskar Assist, all of that kind of stuff. I don't think top-end guilds had to, but, you know, add-ons are becoming more and more prevalent. You get in these top-end guilds literally writing add-ons as the guild is progressing on it. There's someone there writing, like, either a weak aura or making a brand new add-on just to deal with all the chaos beams, or just to deal with the Mark of the Legion.
Well, can you imagine doing Archimon now with no add-ons whatsoever, in comparison to, say, doing Ragnaros in Molten Core with no add-ons?
The thing is that boss design, once again going back to that, is taken into account that people were using add-ons.
Yeah.
I think Archimon went too far, but I'd say the majority of bosses probably are possible to kill without add-ons, but they expect you to.
But the game itself would be a lot fucking harder if you wasn't using add-ons.
Oh yeah, if they just said, oh yeah, we're going into Legion, we're not changing how any of the bosses work, but add-ons are no longer allowed in the game, you'll be banned for using add-ons. No one would do anything.
Yeah.
Everything would grind to a halt, I think.
Yep, the game would slow down. Raid leaders would no longer exist, I don't think.
Well,
we'd get people sitting there with
you
stopwatches.
need external timers. Yeah. Like games like Final Fantasy 14, they don't allow add-ons. They haven't got add-on support. People were writing like external programs that are like reading the code of the game. They basically made a boss mod that runs outside of the game. Because that's what they wanted to do, and that's like the direction that like cool. MMO's going. But yeah, so kind of finish off the question. I would say that I wouldn't say that the old raids were easy. I don't want to say that at all.
They are easy right now.
I would say they were maybe easy mechanically, potentially. Like the mechanics of them were more simplistic. Some of the later bosses, don't get me wrong, they're really complicated. But the thing is, the game's got more difficult in a different way. It's become more to do with mechanics, more to do with how to counteract different abilities and stuff like that. Whereas back in the day, it was more to do with trying to get people to play their classes properly. It was like a social
reason why the game was hard.
Exactly. It was more of a social reason. Players hadn't played as much. And, you know, things like class stacking back in the day was much more of a thing, especially for world first kills. You know, you needed to have those sort of resources, and people weren't particularly ready for it, because why would we suddenly need 8 tanks in the middle of an instance? It's like, oh, okay, now we have to spend fucking 2 weeks or whatever, many weeks trying to get them back up to scratch. So I'd say the game has gotten harder in a different way, but maybe easier in that same way. Maybe it's easier socially because more people understand, but the bosses have become a lot more difficult. And the reason why the things are killed so quickly, maybe on average they're killed roughly the same time, maybe slightly quicker, but I would say it's killed much quicker because there's a group of dedicated players that are just pushing it as fast as they can.
Yeah,
they're just going as hard as they can. They book time off work. They fucking theory craft the shit out of themselves. They get every single last possible upgrade.
PTR.
They go crazy on the PTR. They know everything.
They split raid. They funnel all the gear.
Yeah, and they're literally using
They have
every
people
possible
within their
thing.
guild set out to go and collect gold and bring flasks in and bring pots in and bring wall drops in,
Make add-ons.
make add-ons.
It's like that wasn't the thing back then. It's not even the thing for like the majority of players. It's just these top end people are all like fighting with one another to make sure that they're the best.
So is the game easier? No. Well, thank you very much, guys, for watching this episode of Laps Around Dalaran. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching.